I'm here just to show you a quick start that we've created for our Syncari platform. It's going to be available from their Quick Start library where you can download this and install it and be up and running. So this quick start specifically is our solution for a round robin assignment to the lead records for your Salesforce instance. So you can see here that we've got the pipeline created, and then I want to show you what happens if we go ahead and run that pipeline where we can convert our lead list of these new leads inside of our Salesforce instance. So we can see here I've got the list of all the new leads. We can see that the owner is all under Shine. What we want to do is round robin assign these to different users in our Salesforce instance. So once I go ahead and resume that and go ahead and run a resync, what we'll see is all of these leads will be owned by different users inside of our platform. We can now go ahead and check out our Salesforce, refresh our page, and what we should see change here is the status for all of these leads, as well as the owner names. So let's go ahead and take a look to make sure that this pipeline was completed successfully. Now we do note that there are some lead records here that still have lead status as new, and the owner is still under Shine. So all this tells me is that these are not synced with the Syncari instance, and they weren't affected in this pipeline. Now that could be for a number of reasons, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on now how does this pipeline function and what does each function do, just so you have a general knowledge. And the most important part is what do you need to do when you're going to go ahead and install this quick start. Prerequisites that are required before you even do this installation. That way you can ensure that it's going to be successful and that everything is ready for you to set up on the last step, which is the post installation. So number one requisite is going to be that you need to have an active Salesforce instance connected to your Syncari instance. So you can see here we've got that. The second prerequisite is going to be the need to create custom fields on your Syncari Synapse under the user entity. So we can see here, we can go in and check out our fields. The first field that you're going to want to go ahead and create and make sure that you have is a field called Salesforce User ID. If you've already got this, that's great. Essentially, what this field is doing is making sure that the user records within inside of your Syncari also have a field that shows what is the Salesforce user ID, because that's how we're going to have the identification for who's going to get assigned these leads in this round robin process. So make sure you have that set up, and you can see the conditions here that I've had on the screen. The second field that you want to go ahead and create is a field, we just called it the round robin field. And you can see the conditions here. It's very simple. It's just a Boolean field, and you're going to go ahead and say whether a user is either included on this round robin process or whether they're not. That's going to allow the pipeline to see who is going to be getting assigned these leads and who should never be assigned using this method. This last field that you're going to have to custom create is called last assigned at. And the reason for this one is actually really critical because this is how the whole round robin process works in itself. To get a little bit into the details so you can have a visual of how this works, imagine that round robin is a line of users who are going to get assigned a lead, and they're standing in a line waiting at a table. And as each one walks up to the table, they're given a lead record, and now they have to move to the back of the line. That way they can go through the process of waiting again to get the next lead. And that's more or less how this round robin functions, is by using this field. And we'll talk about it in the function review itself, how exactly that works and what is required around the conditions. The next step of prerequisites is going to exist inside of your actual records for your Syncari instance. So you have to make sure that you've already got a pipeline set up on your own to make sure your users from Salesforce are being imported into your Syncari. So you can see here we've got a list of our users, we've got some user IDs for Salesforce, and we have whether or not they are part of the round robin process. And we use the active field to make sure that no one's going to get assigned something if they're no longer an active user. Once you've got this, now you're ready to kind of go into the installation process. So I'm going to walk through each of the functions that's included on this pipeline and give an explanation of how they're working and really what they're used for, so you can get an idea of really how this is being built in the first place. Hopefully it sparks some creative ideas for yourself and your organization so that you can start creating your own little unique pipelines. So we can see here right now, we're looking at the pipeline for lead under our Sync Studio, and it's a bidirectional. So it's going from Salesforce into Syncari and back out into Salesforce. So for this pipeline, our first function node that we've created here is a filter. And the reason for this is that we're trying to identify which lead records should be going through this process in itself. because we want to make sure we're not just adding in records that don't need to be adjusted or reassigned to different users. So in order to do that, we did it through a conditional field for a filter, and we have created it to say if the status for the lead record is equal to new, then it passes this filter and it goes up this tree of different function nodes. And that's how it's getting processed and assigned to a different user within your Salesforce instance. If the status does not equal new and it's being processed through this, it'll go to the false node here and skip to this last step, which is just to attach it to an existing record if that is an existing record already in your system, and then it'll push it into your Syncari. So it's kind of bypassing that process. So once we get a pass positive on this filter, we're going to see the next function node is actually a lookup function. What we're doing is we're looking up user within our Syncari instance. So we're looking at our user records and we're trying to find a specific type of user to be included on this assignment. And that's where those custom fields are being utilized. So we can see down here that we're using the Syncari entity for user, and the filter conditions are true. So we want to make sure that the user within Syncari has the checkbox for that round robin custom field that you created. It's got to be equal to true, because then they're going to be someone who gets assigned a lead record that has this status of new. The other condition is that it has to have a status equal of true for active, because we don't want to be assigning records to inactive users. Now, this is a really big key step in this whole round robin quick start, is the sort records portion. So the field that we're going to be sorting by is that third custom field that you created called last assigned at. And what we're doing here is making that the sort direction is going to be in an ascending order, which essentially means that this lookup is going to find all user records that match the conditions for the filter. And then how it sorts the results is going to be through the ascending direction of this date time field. So the record that's at the top of this list will have the oldest timestamp, which means that they're next up in line to be assigned this lead record. So that's how we're going through this process. And then we can see later in this process of function nodes how that gets changed and how that line keeps moving. So you're filtering through the different users. So once we've identified the list, we have a list now of who to be taking information from. So the next function node here is a set value field. And what we're doing is we are taking the value, which is going to be from the previous lookup. We can see the field here, Salesforce user ID, which is one of those 3 custom fields that you got to make sure you have. So what we're doing is we're looking them up with the previous function node. We've got the list. Now what we're doing is taking the result from the top, and we are going to use the value that we can pull from that lookup on the last one, which is the Salesforce user ID. And that's that 18-digit code that then allows us to assign it. And we can see here, now we're going to be setting that value from the lookup into the field name, which is the owner ID, which is in Salesforce how the owner is identified for a lead record. So once we've done this, now we're going to this next step, and this function here is going to be a more of an action function. So we are updating a record that exists already in Syncari. So the record that we're going to be updating is the user that's being used on this. So we see Syncari entity we're looking at is user. And again, this is all related to that lookup round robin. And what we're going to do is filter the condition to make sure that the user ID equals the previous lookup ID, which is going to be from down here. So now we have the actual record that we're looking at. And then we look at the last piece of this function, and we're going to make sure what are we going to be updating here. So the updated field is going to be the last assigned at. The new value is going to be before 0 seconds, which really just means that it's going to set the date time to be a stamp of right in the moment that this pipeline is being processed. So now you've essentially given it a new date time, which is up to date. And we remember again from the lookup piece, that essentially moves them to the bottom of the list to identify that now they don't need to be assigned a lead record until they're the last person to have received it. So we've updated our user record. Now what we have to actually do is avoid getting in an infinite loop where these new lead records in Salesforce are processing through this assignment round robin pipeline over and over and over. And to do that, we have to make sure that that filter leads by the new status, which is the first function, is not actually accurate anymore for this specific record that's been changed. So we're doing an update field here to the lead status. And this is going to be an important part for you to understand for your own organization. The new value here with this quick start comes default as open, not contacted. That's because within our own personal organization, Salesforce, that's one of the lead statuses that we use, and we make it go from new to this specific status, which is just how we think about making most sense. Is it's still technically a new record, but it's been open in sense of it's assigned to an actual user now. It's not our default Salesforce user that gets all new leads. So we've created this, but for you, you want to make sure that your lead status for the new value here is updated to reflect your personal organization, and it's going to have to be whatever it is that you guys use. And you'll be able to do that when you go and create a draft of this pipeline and you open this specific pipeline node, and you can configure the node to change the status here. You'll have to type in exactly how it is for your Salesforce for the display name. So you can see here also that the field name for which this is actually being changed, because this is an update field function, we're updating the status. So that's really critical in your post-installation process. You're going to have to make sure that you go ahead and change this value to be whatever it is that reflects for your own side. And the other piece here is the last portion, which is attach record. We have this here really to avoid duplications. So if a new record is coming in from Salesforce, we don't want to create a duplicate if it already exists within Syncari, because it may have come from a HubSpot or Marketo or any other program you have within inside of your Syncari instance that's connected as a synapse. So we look to attach this using the email field on the lead record and checking the lead records from a Syncari side. If there's a record that has the same email, then we're going to attach that and we'll make changes depending on that. If not, it's just going to go through and create a new record. So that's it. The quick start's pretty simple to get installed. Really just has the prerequisites of creating those fields, which is not difficult at all. And then that last really critical piece is that you're going to want to make sure that you update this new value. Now you will see in the actual installation that it'll have another function in between attach record and lead. What that's going to mean is basically we've put in a placeholder, and you just have to delete that once you're ready. The reason why we have that there is to avoid you installing this and immediately seeing changes take place before you're ready to actually hit the sync button on this whole pipeline. But that's it.